Hey guys, before we get into the rest of the video, I just wanted to state that when I say low elo, I don't mean to sound too harsh, but I'm really talking about anybody who is in between bronze and silver, sometimes even gold 3. 95% of these players do not have game sense or haven't developed any type of siege knowledge yet. They're mainly winning their fights just because they have raw gun skill, and that just is good for them, honestly. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video, and today we're going to talk about something that people really struggle with in low elo, and I believe that's defending. The main problem I see in low elo when defending against the attacking team is that a lot of people get very aggressive and they seem to push way too far out of the objective or choose one certain type of operator amongst the team, let's say like a full roamer team or a full anchor team, and they don't really have any diversity. They kind of just play what they want. So going into the video, we're going to try and talk about each individual. A lot of people in low elo think that there are only two classes of defenders, which would be anchors and roamers, but actually, at least in my opinion, I think there are about 4. You could consider the last 2 to be kind of like a flex role, but I want to narrow them down and kind of get into the nitty-gritty of them. So that being said, what are the types of defenders? In my opinion, the 4 types of defenders are anchors, roamers, trap operators, intel operators, and each of them have their own type of ability, whether it be passive or active. That being said, what are active abilities and what are passive abilities? An active ability would be one that does not stay on the playing field after the defender dies, such as smoke grenades or Cavi's silent step ability. Passive abilities would be ones such as Maestro's cameras or Rook's defender plates, because after the operator dies, they stay on the field and they're still useful to the team. It's up to you which you think is more important to the team, passive or active abilities, but in my opinion, passive abilities will always beat active abilities. So for the rest of the video, I want to talk about what defenders to choose in low elo, what their abilities are, how they can help you, and kind of how to play them, and what they're all about. With that being said, let's get into it. The first type of defender that I want to talk about are anchors. They're usually the most one-dimensional, but they are also the most easy to play in most cases. A couple of suggestions that I could give to you guys to play as anchor operators in low elo are Doc and Rook, and the one that I would suggest the most is Rook, and here's why. Rook's armor plates are very effective in most cases, as it gives you a increased rating of armor by 1, and it also guarantees a down but not out state as long as you aren't shot in the head. It's very good for solo queuing, and it can help in almost every situation. To explain that a little deeper, let's say Cavi picks up Rook's plates. She's known as a 1 armor operator. It would make her a 2 armor operator while still maintaining her speed rating of 3. Rook's armor plates are considered a passive ability, so that means when Rook dies, they don't disappear, so they're still useful to the team. Both of Rook's primaries are very balanced. They both have very low recoil, moderate damage, and they both can hold an ACOG, so it gives you advantages when peeking long angles or tight corners. Most people prefer the MP5 over the P90, but I think both are very viable depending on the situation. Rook's secondaries are also very good. His revolver does crazy amounts of damage, and it's really good at two-shotting people, and his other pistol is just very balanced. It has a pretty large clip size, and it does moderate amount of damage. It doesn't have that much recoil either, so it's very easy to control. That being said, Rook is a very balanced operator. Nobody's really ever mad when somebody picks Rook. I can't imagine anybody actually being mad at somebody picking Rook, and if they do, they're kind of trolling, because he benefits the team greatly, and he's just an overall good pick. The 2 downsides that I could see of playing Rook are that he doesn't have any real hard breach denial, and he also doesn't have any real rush denial. He comes with impacts and barbed wire, but ultimately there are just other operators that are better at doing those 2 things than using a secondary gadget. Overall, Rook is just a very good operator at low elo. He doesn't have any real downsides, and if somebody really gets mad at you for picking Rook, just tell them to F off, because your Rook plates just saved his life. Moving on to the opposite side of anchors, we have the roaming side of Siege. In my opinion, the purpose of roamers are to collect information from the edges of the maps and hopefully get 1 or 2 picks off before the attackers can actually reach the objective. The reasoning for me choosing Vigil over Cavi and low elo is just due to his ability to counter and destroy bad droning ability and bad team communication. Vigil's ERC7 is an active ability that follows Vigil to the grave. It wipes his appearance from drones and allows Vigil to move almost freely throughout the map without being spotted on any cameras. Vigil is highly effective when it comes to late rotations and late flanks, and he's really beneficial to the team when it comes to a team kind of bunching up in one hallway because he can sneak up on them without a drone spotting him. I would say both of Vigil's primary guns are actually very good. His K1A is a submachine gun, it has relatively low recoil, and it has a pretty high damage rating. The K1A feels relatively similar to the UMP when you shoot it, and if you can master the recoil for it, it becomes a headshot machine. His second primary, the Boss G, comes with an ACOG, shouts out to Coconut Bra, and it's usually a 1 to 2 shot down depending where you hit them. It's a 1 shot down if you hit them in the chest, and a 2 shot down if you hit them in the legs. Both of Vigil's secondary guns are pistols. They are machine pistols, but that being said, they do have a moderate to high recoil. So if you're very good at controlling recoil, Vigil might be your defender. Vigil's secondary gadgets are impact grenades and a bulletproof camera. Most people run the impact grenades just to make rotation holes, but if you want the extra intel, you can bring the bulletproof. Vigil's ability to basically disregard roaming entirely in the game gives him a very high advantage against attackers, and it makes it easier to learn roaming as a whole when you're first starting out. The only main counter to Vigil, I would say, are just good communication and Dokkaebi. Doki was released for the sole purpose of countering Vigil, and that being said, there isn't anybody else in the game who really has an ability to counter him, besides from just strong team communication. So at low elo, where team communication really isn't a thing, Vigil might be the perfect choice for you. For the third category of defenders, we have trap operators. Some examples of trap operators would be Ela and Legion. For the recommendation that I would choose at low elo for trap operators would be Legion. When it comes to Legion's kit, he's very balanced. His primary guns are very good, his secondary guns are very good, and his goo mines are just incomparable when it comes to collecting intel as well as stopping rushes. Legion is a 2-2 operator, meaning he has 2 speed and 2 armor, and he's relatively easy to play. His ability is a passive one. He can throw goo mines out, which are small little objects that when an attacker steps on them, they don't do initial damage, but over time they do take ticks of health away. This is especially good when a team brings a shield, like a Monty. It forces him to drop his shield, and it opens up the attackers for infinite amounts of headshots. This is especially good in situations where a team is grouped behind a Montaigne, and he doesn't communicate that he's going to drop his shield to pull out the Legion trap, and he drops his shield and the attackers' heads are just sitting there waiting to be shot. His goo mines can also be placed far off of sight in order to give intel on which side the attackers are coming from. So not only can he stop an entire rush with a shield, he can also collect information using sound cues from cross map. For Legion's guns, his primaries are very good. His T5 SMG has little to no recoil and also has a very high fire rate, and his shotgun, the 612 SD, comes fully silenced without having to put on the attachment. He only has one secondary pistol, it's the Q929, but it's pretty balanced. The iron sights are kind of bad in my opinion, but it does decent amount of damage and it feels good to shoot. Legion's gadgets include impact grenades and a bulletproof camera, just like Vigil. Most people pick the impact grenades, but in case you need more intel, you can also pick the bulletproof camera. Legion is extremely flexible when it comes to defending because he can play very far off-site and stop attackers that way, or he can play as a flex anchor operator, sitting in room and placing goo mines along the outer edges of the objective. I would recommend Legion honestly to any elo. He's very good at collecting information as well as stopping rushes, and I don't really think there's any downside to picking Legion, just as I said with Rook. That being said, I would say that Legion's ability isn't as impairing or damaging as other trap operators' abilities. Operators like Frost and Capcan do a lot more damage and also can impair the attackers a lot more. It's just that Legion has an infinite amount of his ability, so I feel like it just fits better when you're trying to learn trap operators operators, it gives you much more room for error. Overall, I think Legion is the most balanced trap operator on defense, and I feel like he's the easiest to learn just the basics of trapping in general. That being said, we move on to the final part of this video, which is intel operators. The purpose of intel operators is to gain information about the attackers without them knowing. Examples of intel operators would be Mazi or Valkyrie, but in this case we're going to focus on Valkyrie because I feel like she's just easier to learn. Valkyrie's ability is passive, and she has the ability to place 3 cameras that can swivel on a 360-degree angle anywhere on the map as long as they stick. A lot of people use these cameras to get pre-placed C4 kills, but in our case we're just going to focus on gathering intel. In my opinion, her cameras allow you to be more creative in the game and allow you to learn angles that you may or may not have seen before placing the cameras. These cameras are just great at collecting intel, and they can also be placed in tricky spots so the defenders can't shoot them like normal default cameras. Again, this ability is passive, and anybody on the defending side can see through these cameras and use them to pretty much the extent of any other camera in the game. Her cameras allow you to gather so much information throughout the map. As for Valk's gun kit, both of her primaries and her secondary weapon are very powerful. Valk's submachine gun primary is favored by most people on defense just because of its high fire rate and easy to control recoil. It does a decent amount of damage and is relatively quick to kill. Her second primary, her Spaz 12 shotgun, does a very high amount of damage and is very good for opening rotation holes in soft walls and can also one-shot at a relatively close range. Valkyrie only has 1 secondary pistol, but that being said, it is the Desert Eagle. This Desert Eagle is just a standard Desert Eagle. It doesn't have anything too crazy. You can attach a silencer to it as well as a muzzle brake, and she's also relatively just a very flexible operator with both of her shotgun and her MPX. Valk was one of the first operators announced for DLC, and she's been picked at a very high pick rate until this day in this season. I think she'll still continue to be picked at a high rate just because of her versatility and her ability to gather intel as a whole, so she's definitely not a bad operator whatsoever. As for the downsides of Valk, like other cam operators, she doesn't have an ability to actively harm anybody using her cameras, such as Echo or Maestro, but that being said, she does have more cameras than those other 2 operators. Her cameras are smaller and can be put in a lot more tricky places so that the attackers can't see them, and you can usually collect more information. Coming to our conclusion, I hope you guys learned at least a little bit about the game and what it takes to start playing the game as a defensive operator. Remember that there are 4 types of different defending operators and not just 2. A lot of these defenders can be flexed, but there are some with just a primary role. Also remember that as a defender, your sole advantage is that the attackers have to come to you. It's better to play defensive than to get over aggressive and get picked off. Something that I see a lot happen on defensive sides in almost every elo that I've been in is that when the defenders are at an advantage people-wise, they'll get over aggressive and peek stupid angles, and then it'll turn a 1-4 scenario into a 1-1 scenario, and they'll end up losing just because of a bit of cockiness. So as a defender, remember to just stay level-headed, and no matter who you choose and what situation, don't get overconfident.